Behind the fame, the fortune, and Robert Redford's effortless cool was a deeply private life shaped by loves he never fully let go of. After his death at 89 in September 2025, a quieter truth began to emerge. In his final years, Redford had opened up about the 6 women who left lasting marks on his heart. The first wife who believed in him before success arrived, the passion that almost overwhelmed him, the friendship that hovered just short of romance, and the woman who ultimately gave him peace. Why did he wait so long to share these stories? And who did he truly see as the love of his life, even at the end? Stay with us as we uncover the answers. Lola Van Wagenen, the first love who never left his soul. Robert Redford's first great love was Lola Van Wagenen, a woman defined less by Hollywood and more by purpose. An environmental activist and producer, Lola built her life around protecting nature and promoting sustainable living. She was forward-looking, grounded, and quietly resilient, someone who believed in action rather than nostalgia. They met in the late 1950s at the University of Utah, drawn together by shared interests in art, film, and the outdoors. Their bond deepened quickly, and they married in 1958, long before fame found Redford. As his career took off, the pressures of Hollywood, constant travel, public scrutiny, and long absences strained their private world. Tragedy struck early with the loss of their infant son, Scott, in 1959, a grief that both devastated and bound them together. Throughout their marriage, Lola remained a steady force behind Redford, encouraging his creative ambitions and shaping his values. Their shared commitment to social and environmental causes influenced the choices he made as a filmmaker, pushing him toward work that reflected conscience as much as craft. Together, they supported causes that mattered to them, proving their partnership extended beyond home and family. After 27 years, they divorced in 1985, quietly and respectfully, choosing to prioritize their children and maintain mutual regard. In the years that followed, Lola continued her advocacy with the same focus and integrity, while Redford moved forward publicly. Yet those close to him understood that some loves don't fade. For Redford, Lola wasn't just his first wife. She was the anchor who shaped the man he became, and a love he never entirely left behind. Natalie Wood, the spark that burned bright in the golden haze of 1960s Hollywood. In the mid-1960s, Hollywood was a tightly controlled world. Studios ruled careers and paparazzi followed stars relentlessly. It was in that whirlwind that Robert Redford crossed paths with Natalie Wood, a woman whose presence felt almost unreal. By then, Natalie Wood was already Hollywood royalty. She had grown up in front of the camera, evolving from a beloved child star into one of the most luminous leading ladies of her generation. Redford, still climbing toward stardom, saw her as both a colleague and an enigma, the kind of woman impossible to fully understand, yet impossible to ignore. They appeared together in Inside Daisy Clover and This Property is Condemned, and their on-screen chemistry was undeniable. Audiences sensed something authentic in the way they looked at each other, something that went beyond scripted dialogue. Redford embodied the cool, drifting outsider, while Natalie played the vulnerable dreamer longing for something real. Together, they reflected the restless spirit of a generation searching for meaning. Off-camera, rumors followed them quietly. There was talk of an unspoken connection, something deep but carefully guarded. For Natalie, Redford represented calm in a life often overwhelmed by pressure. He didn't chase attention or headlines. He remained private, grounded, and steady. For Redford, Natalie was more than a co-star. She was dazzling, sensitive, and complicated, radiant on the surface but carrying turmoil underneath. Friends later said he cared for her deeply, yet understood the emotional chaos that surrounded her. When Natalie Wood died tragically in 1981, the loss struck Redford hard. He rarely spoke about her, and when he did, his voice softened, as if he were protecting a fragile memory. She was not the love he built a life with, but she was something else entirely. Barbra Streisand, a clash of fire and ice. If Natalie Wood was a spark in Robert Redford's life, Barbra Streisand was a wildfire. When Robert Redford and Streisand came together for The Way We Were, both were already towering figures in Hollywood. Still, neither could have predicted the emotional force that would ignite between them, or how deeply audiences would feel it. The film wasn't just a romance. It was a collision of opposites. Streisand embodied passion, conviction, and emotional transparency. She lived loudly, pouring herself into every scene with blazing intensity. Redford, by contrast, was restraint personified, cool, controlled, and inward, a man who expressed longing by holding it back. The friction between them felt raw and intimate, and it resonated because it wasn't manufactured. That tension was real. Off-screen, their connection mirrored what audiences saw. Streisand later admitted she was captivated by Redford, once describing him as the golden boy, the embodiment of everything Hollywood promised but rarely delivered. Redford admired her brilliance and drive, but her emotional intensity sometimes overwhelmed him. Where Streisand wanted full emotional immersion, Redford needed space, quiet, and control. That push and pull became the soul of The Way We Were. Love struggling against time, ideology, and temperament. Two people drawn together but unable to move in the same direction. Years later, Streisand hinted that Redford might have been the one who slipped away. A love that never fully unfolded but never entirely disappeared either. She wasn't the woman he built a life with, but she was a defining chapter. A powerful reminder that some connections aren't meant to last, only to leave a mark that lingers long after the story ends. Sonia Braga, the passion that almost consumed him. By the late 1980s, Robert Redford had reached a rare level of power in Hollywood. He was no longer just a leading man, but a creative force, actor, director, producer, someone capable of shaping entire worlds on screen. He was disciplined, controlled, and deliberate in both his work and his emotions. And then came Sonia Braga. Braga was unlike anyone Redford had known. She wasn't merely beautiful, she was fearless. Known internationally for her electrifying performances in Donna Floor and Her Two Husbands and Kiss of the Spider-Woman, she radiated intensity and emotional honesty. Everything about her was unapologetic, her passion, her energy, her refusal to be contained. She lived from the heart, and she burned brightly. For Redford, who had spent most of his life carefully guarding his inner world, Braga was a shock to the system. She wasn't a quiet presence or a stabilizing force. She was a storm. Their connection went far beyond attraction. It was cultural, emotional, and even spiritual. Braga brought with her the rhythm, heat, and expressiveness of Latin America. Redford brought restraint, reflection, and a deeply rooted need for balance. The contrast was intoxicating and unsettling. Friends later described their relationship as consuming, even volatile. Lola Van Wagenen had grounded him. Barbra Streisand had challenged him. But Sonia Braga swept him away entirely. For the first time, Redford wasn't calmly observing chaos from a distance. He was the chaos. But passion at that intensity rarely lasts. It burns too hot for too long. Redford eventually found himself longing for peace and steadiness, while Braga thrived in emotion, movement, and unpredictability. Their worlds collided beautifully, but harmony proved impossible. The romance was brief, but its impact was lasting. Years later, Redford spoke of Braga with unmistakable admiration, calling her a force of nature. That single phrase captured everything. She wasn't the woman he built a life with, but she was the flame he could never fully extinguish, a reminder that even the most controlled man can lose himself when passion burns hot enough. Sonia Braga, the passion that almost consumed him. By the late 1980s, Robert Redford had reached a rare level of power in Hollywood. He was no longer just a leading man, but a creative force, actor, director, producer, someone capable of shaping entire worlds on screen. He was disciplined, controlled, and deliberate in both his work and his emotions. And then came Sonia Braga. Braga was unlike anyone Redford had known. She wasn't merely beautiful, she was fearless. Known internationally for her electrifying performances in Donna Floor and Her Two Husbands and Kiss of the Spider-Woman, she radiated intensity and emotional honesty. Everything about her was unapologetic. Her passion, her energy, her refusal to be contained. She lived from the heart, and she burned brightly. For Redford, who had spent most of his life carefully guarding his inner world, Braga was a shock to the system. She wasn't a quiet presence or a stabilizing force, she was a storm. Their connection went far beyond attraction. It was cultural, emotional, and even spiritual. Braga brought with her the rhythm, heat, and expressiveness of Latin America. Redford brought restraint, reflection, and a deeply rooted need for balance. The contrast was intoxicating and unsettling. Friends later described their relationship as consuming, even volatile. Lola Van Wagenen had grounded him. Barbra Streisand had challenged him. But Sonia Braga swept him away entirely. For the first time, Redford wasn't calmly observing chaos from a distance. He was the chaos. But passion at that intensity rarely lasts. It burns too hot for too long. Redford eventually found himself longing for peace and steadiness, while Braga thrived in emotion, movement, and unpredictability. Their worlds collided beautifully, but harmony proved impossible. The romance was brief, but its impact was lasting. Years later, Redford spoke of Braga with unmistakable admiration, calling her a force of nature. That single phrase captured everything. She wasn't the woman he built a life with, but she was the flame he could never fully extinguish. Sibylle Szaggars, the woman who finally tamed his heart. By the time Robert Redford met Sibylle Szaggars, he had already lived through several lifetimes. He had been Hollywood's golden boy, a filmmaker who reshaped the industry, and an activist unafraid to challenge the system. He had experienced fame at its peak, heartbreak at its deepest, and the quiet loneliness that often follows when the spotlight fades. Love found him again not with drama, but with calm. Sibylle was not an actress and had no interest in Hollywood's machinery. She was a German-born artist whose paintings were rooted in nature, earth, color, and stillness, the very elements that had always grounded Redford. They met in the 1990s, during a period when he had stepped back from public life and retreated to the serenity of Sundance, Utah. Her presence fit seamlessly into that world. She didn't seek attention or headlines, and she found meaning in silence rather than applause. Their relationship unfolded far from red carpets and premieres. It grew quietly, in mountains and forests, in long conversations and shared solitude, away from cameras and chaos. After more than a decade together, they married in 2009 in a private ceremony in Hamburg, Germany. There were no flashing lights or media frenzy, just a simple moment reflecting exactly who they were together. Sibylle became more than Redford's partner. She became his refuge. The calm that followed decades of emotional storms. Looking back later in life, it was clear she wasn't just another chapter in his story. She was the closing act, the woman who walked beside him with grace and steadiness. If passion once set his world ablaze, Sibylle offered something far rarer, peace. And sometimes, quiet, enduring peace is the greatest love of all. Jane Fonda, the bond that never quite became love. Few on-screen pairings ever felt as natural as Robert Redford and Jane Fonda. From their first collaboration in Barefoot in the Park, audiences sensed something special, an easy, playful chemistry that felt genuine and deeply human. When they reunited in The Electric Horseman, and again decades later in Our Souls at Night, that spark was still there. Older and wiser, they carried the same warmth and familiarity, as if time had only softened the edges, not dimmed the connection. Yet for all the closeness, they were never lovers. What bound them wasn't romance, but something quieter and perhaps more enduring, a connection that hovered near love without ever crossing the line. Redford admired Fonda's courage, her political conviction, and her refusal to stay silent. Fonda, for her part, never hid her affection, and once admitted she wished they might have been more. Timing, temperament, and choice kept them where they were. Redford guarded his private world carefully, while Fonda lived boldly in the public eye. Perhaps he feared risking the trust they shared. Perhaps he understood that some bonds are too delicate to test. When they came together again late in life, audiences felt it instantly, a sense of destiny looping back, offering a glimpse of what might have been. Jane Fonda was not a lost love. She was a reminder of one, proof that not all love stories are meant to be lived, and that some are meant to be felt quietly, forever. In the end, Robert Redford's story wasn't defined only by fame, awards, or unforgettable films, but by the women who shaped his heart at different moments of his life. Each connection left something behind: love, loss, passion, peace, and quiet lessons that followed him to the very end. Which of the 6 women do you think had the greatest impact on Robert Redford's life, and why? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep look, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more powerful stories that go beyond the spotlight.